Welcome to Movie Magic. I'm your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and very recently I finally went ahead and watched Iron Lung. I was waiting for the digital streaming release of the movie to come out to watch it, because I was actually planning to watch it in the theater in January, but the day that I was going to go do it, my car had issues, and I could not make the 2-hour trip to the nearest theater showing it, so I missed the theatrical run of Iron Lung, very unfortunately. I definitely wanted to watch it back then. But with the streaming release recently, I did finally go ahead and watch it, and today we're going to talk about my general thoughts about this. You know, similar to last week's video where I talked about Backrooms, this video is unscripted. There's not even any notes for it. Normally I have notes, so we're just going to spitball some of my thoughts and impressions of the movie, you know, having watched it like less than a week ago at the time of recording anyway. I think it was about a week ago at the time of this video's, actually, sorry, 2 weeks ago at the time of this video's release. The timing of things doesn't really matter. The point is, I watched Iron Lung, and my media impressions of it are that I actually really liked it. You know, I might not have well, actually I did kind of love it, to be honest. You know, there's a lot about this movie that I did really, really like. So let's figure out what the topics are even to talk about with Iron Lung, because like I don't even know how to structure my thoughts on this video. Last week's video about Backrooms, I basically knew some of the points that I wanted to touch on. This time I'm not actually sure all of the points that I want to touch on, but let's give this a shot. The main thing is I very, very highly commend Markiplier's work on this film, actually. You know, just the passion project to go through and actually make a movie is something that, you know, there was a time in my life, a handful of years ago, where a friend and I were actually considering doing like short film stuff and kind of seeing what happened with that, where that took us. So there's an aspect of filmmaking and certainly the passion for it that I can understand and I look at and really appreciate and find addictive. Like I find, you know, talking about the making of films and frankly behind the scenes stuff of filmmaking in particular compared to other mediums that I find like really, really engaging. I just find it also fascinating, and to, you know, hear about some of what's going on with Iron Lung and to see, you know, another creator actually go through with making that process, I commend a lot of what he was able to do with this movie. And like hearing, you know, going back and watching a couple of interviews that he has done ever since the movie came out was like honestly a real treat, because I got to see, you know, a glimpse of the behind the scenes there, because quite frankly, like Iron Lung required a lot of creativity to do what Markiplier did here. So I guess that's kind of the topic that we ought to like jump into with regards to my thoughts on the movie itself. Is this entire movie is confined to essentially one location. You know, there are a couple of flashes, like a couple of flashbacks to another location. And technically speaking, there are another couple shots that also take place, you know, not in properly the sub that the entire movie is otherwise set in, but like generally speaking, you could say that 2 hours of this 2-hour 5-minute, well, I guess if you take the credits off, it's like an hour and 50 minutes out of the hour and 55 minutes or something that the actual runtime of the movie is. All of that takes place in one location, is just within the sub. So how do you actually tackle that confined space within a movie that is, you know, approaching 2 hours long? That was something that I was a little bit concerned about. And, you know, my only couple of real criticisms of the movie come from the fact that it is a bit indulgent in some ways. You know, I really enjoyed the movie, but you had to get really creative with shot choice and also, you know, the intentionality behind what is actually going on in every single one of those shots, to the degree that some of them did feel a little unnecessary. A couple of scenes were a little bit overlong in some regard, but the degree to which the intentionality, whatever the word is, behind all the shots is definitely something that I really respect here. You know, I may have felt like it was a little long in the tooth in some places, and I definitely felt like some of the shots were a little bit over the top. But I respect what was happening here, because there were a lot of swings taken with the cinematography, right? So like there are some of those shots that might be a little bit indulgent, sure, but again, you're confined within one location for this entire movie, basically, and so you kind of have to be creative with some of those shots to, you know, justify the amount of runtime. And so some of those shots weren't really necessary. Some of them were a little bit out there, even beyond what I think was necessary to get the point across. But there was a lot of attention to detail within most of the movie, to the extent that I'm willing to forgive those things very, very easily. And I didn't feel like the movie was so long as to like bore me. It was definitely a relatively similar situation as some of Backrooms, where Backrooms, which I talked about last week, of course, as I've mentioned a couple times in this video already, I'm sorry. A lot of what that movie is doing is like tonal, it's definitely building up a lot of dread and anticipation towards stuff going on. Iron Lung is very much doing the same thing, and I think that it does so to a very, very good degree. I was really into the tension building through those first couple of acts, the random shots that really unsettle you at various different points in time, the concern. Markiplier does honestly a very, very good job with his character, like actually acting him out. I never felt like, it was a big concern of mine actually going into watching the movie. It's just like, how much am I going to be like seeing Mark from YouTube versus like the character? And I felt like I was actually seeing the character. And maybe this is aided by the fact that I don't actually really watch Markiplier. I'm not a follower of his. I'm not a subscriber of his. I really respect him on the platform, and I like him, personally. That implies that I've met him. I've not. But I do like Markiplier. I just don't really watch any of his stuff. But I was still worried about like how much of the character was just going to be Mark as he is on YouTube versus the character. And I think that he did a really good job, and Mark's performance especially was a huge part of what made the movie like work. If Mark didn't turn in a good performance, it would have been a straight up garbage movie. But I was really compelled by him, his performance, and by the character, and that all worked out. The primarily voice performances of the other characters was also very well done. I think that the direction there was quite good. I felt like all these characters were pretty serious. I do think that a little bit of that, maybe not indulgent problem comes through, but there were some times where I didn't feel like some of the character interactions were like wholly realistic, where I felt like they were being over dramatized because of them being, voices coming through a speaker and not actually appearing on the screen. So, there was a little bit of there where I was maybe ever so slightly distracted by that fact at a couple of different points. But again, it does make up for the fact that those characters don't appear on screen. But like as far as everything that goes on, I just really liked the developments of the stories and those characters, the character interactions, the revelations of certain lore stuff. There's a lot to really think about with regards to lore and that kind of thing in Iron Lung. I think that's probably true from the game that it's based on as well, which I have not played. I specifically chose not to play it before watching the movie. I wanted to see the movie blind, which might be a weird thing of me, but I don't know. The point is that I'm pretty sure a lot of like the inherent interest of the lore of the movie comes from the inherent interest of the lore within the game itself as well. And I think that to whatever extent that Mark managed to work with David, what is his name? I forget his last name. I'm so sorry. It's difficult to pronounce anyway, so sorry. The game creator, who, also did some work within the movie. The way that story is suggested, lore and certain story reveals, and the questioning of what is and isn't real at different points in the movie as well was also something that I was really compelled by. So, kind of go along with that discussion that I had a little bit earlier about the entire movie is set within basically one location. What are some ways that you can actually make that work for a 2-hour movie? And quite frankly, the structure of the movie is another thing that I was really surprised by and really into, because the whole like first act of the movie, like the first 45 minutes was something that passed, and I like scroll my mouse a little bit over YouTube, see that there's still like over an hour left of the movie. I'm just like, how in the world are we going to get another hour out of this? But there's enough expansion to the actual scope of what's going on in just the right ways at just the right moments through the second act that make that compelling. And, kind of what I hinted at there, minor spoilers, I guess, the questioning of what is and isn't actually real at certain points, especially near the end of the second act and moving through a lot of the third makes a lot of the tension really, it compounds. It does compound really well. That was something that I had a fun time. I had a really enjoyable time watching this movie. Definitely a lot more than I expected to. I thought that I would like it, but I went into this out of, morbid curiosity as much as anything else. And I thought I came out of it just having had, like I said, a really enjoyable time. I definitely, like I also mentioned, commend Markiplier and his work, his passion for this project. I think that the editing was overall very well done, despite being, like I said, a little long in the tooth sometimes. Certain shots that just didn't fully need to be in there for that, long in the tooth reason. Some of the shots that were a little bit over the top. But overall, I had a really good time with this, and I think that, the offhand nature in which the monster is also dealt with in this movie is also super, super good. It's like, this was something that I mentioned very briefly in last week's video about Backrooms. Definitely a problem that a lot of movies that have a prominent form of monster in them, and which go about like not really showing much of them, if at all, for a lot of the beginning. Like when they do have a reveal, can be something that is very unsatisfying, can feel undeserved to a degree. And that was something that I had a little bit of concern about in Backrooms last week. If you want more information about my actual thoughts on the movie, you can check out that video. This week, I found the way that Iron Lung handles that a lot more intriguing, because you do get glimpses of it implicitly through, the pictures that Mark has to take. And that, gives you enough of an image to work off of, but not enough of to actually know what the thing is. And so if you haven't seen like some of the behind the scenes of like what that actually looks like, from the world or from the lore, from the movie creators or anything like that, you end up like not really sure what you're looking at. And so the building up of tension and whatnot is still effective, even though you have technically seen the monster, because you haven't really seen the monster, and you never really do. And that's also something that just happened to work in Iron Lung. So you end up like going crazy alongside Mark's character. And just, overall, I had a really great time with the movie. I think the package was overall really great. I didn't like adore this thing, but I really enjoyed it, definitely enough to actually buy it, because I only rented it on YouTube. I'm going to be buying a physical version whenever Mark has those out, assuming they're not out by the time this video comes out. I have no idea. But it was one that I enjoyed and really want to watch again, so that I can pick apart more to it, because that's another thing that I really, really enjoyed about this experience, was just how much that there is to like look into, from the framing, from the blocking, from the set design, from the little details and lore, certain types of stuff. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of things that are foreshadowed in really interesting ways that I like could latch onto while I was watching it the first time, being like, there's some of these things, like some details here that like I'm sure will like mean something even more if I rewatch this. And so I do really want to rewatch Iron Lung so that I can catch some more of that stuff. So that was also something else that I enjoyed a lot. So but coming up to this point, I talked about how I really liked a lot of the performances. I liked a lot of the creativity behind it. There were some things that I wasn't fully sold on. Some over the topness in some ways. Speaking of over the topness, I think that the climax is a lot in this movie. It's basically got an unofficial, maybe as an official, but world record for the most amount of fake blood used in a film. And I can definitely see how and why with the climax of this movie, which gets to be a lot. The end of this movie is crazy. It goes nuts. It goes bonkers. Don't even know how to explain it. I'm not going to spoil any of it, but like even a lot of that was like, okay. And I wasn't sure how I felt about the ending, about that climax either. But overall, again, kind of similar to the Backrooms, like the more that I think about this, the more that I think it really all fits into place and works out, and which is the reason why both that movie and this movie are ones that I am going to buy when they are available to buy physically and rewatch, because I want to pick apart all those extra details, all the things that I missed the first time, all that kind of extra stuff. Just overall a really great experience. If you watched Iron Lung, I would definitely be interested to hear what you think about it, if you're somebody who has played the game. I would be interested to hear what you think about the adaptive qualities of it, because the fact that I did watch this movie without having played the game, I can see why the movie is 2 hours and not 1 hour like the game is. You know, I can see where a lot of those creative decisions were made that are like movie specific as opposed to a game, so I can totally see what's coming on from all of that stuff. So I just overall really respect the movie, but I'd be interested to hear what people's thoughts are if they have played the game as well, if they played the game first and thought that there was no reason for the movie to be 2 hours when the game is only 1 hour, because I've seen that criticism out there. I'd just be interested to hear a little bit more. But those are my thoughts on Iron Lung for now. I appreciate you for watching this video. If you did, for now, I've been your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC. This time I'm doing the right order. I really enjoyed Iron Lung, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.